Assessment statements 2.99 design an experiment and 2.910 outline the effects. I'm going to have you self-explore. So that means we're going to do an experiment in class. Virtual students, you will do an interactive online, and you will find out the answers to these yourself. So I don't want to give those answers just strictly through a video or through a lecture. However, speaking of lectures, 2.911 I will talk about. So 2.911 says, it says outline the changes to the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and rocks. So we need to talk about three of these different things due to photosynthesis. So let's start with the atmosphere first. Just a little background. So a billion years ago, more than that, Mr. Fleming wasn't here, but there were organisms that started doing photosynthesis. So we had types of bacteria that grew in these huge masses together, and they were photosynthetic, and they were called cyanobacteria. So they contain chloroplast that could capture that light's energy, create food in the form of glucose, and their waste product was oxygen. So what happened once the oxygen started? So let's talk about this. So in a long time ago, right, the Earth's life was basically confined to the oceans. So here we have our oceans, and all the things that were living on this planet lived there. And that was because there wasn't a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere. Maybe enough to support life, an aerobic life. But the problem was that organisms couldn't move to land because ultraviolet radiation bombarded the Earth's surface. And ultraviolet radiation, especially UVA, ultraviolet radiation is high energy, and it can destroy organic molecules like DNA and proteins. So there's no way a plant or any kind of organism could make it to the terrestrial, make it to land. But once these bacteria started producing oxygen as a waste product of photosynthesis, this oxygen moved to the upper atmosphere and changed into O3. O3 is ozone. And ozone is amazing because ozone blocks out ultraviolet radiation. So all of this ultraviolet radiation that was hitting the atmosphere disappeared. And that's when we first started getting our first photosynthetic plants growing on the surface, which further released oxygen and increased it to levels where we have about 20% where we are now. We're at 21% actually. 21% oxygen. That's the composition of our atmosphere. So here there's oxygen on the atmosphere or in the atmosphere, and also this protective layer of ozone was preventing ultraviolet radiation coming in and destroying any organic molecules. So that's like how the O2 changed in the oceans as oxygen levels increased to provide more oxygen available for other organisms like fish. Yes, those are supposed to be fish. So you can have more advanced organisms forming in the ocean and also providing this protective layer for animals to move onto land. Last, we need to talk about rocks. So once we had enough oxygen in the atmosphere, it caused the rocks to oxidize. It caused iron to oxidize. And when iron oxidizes, it changes into iron ore. It basically precipitates into a solid. So iron that was floating around, now I'll draw a different ocean. Iron that was floating around in our oceans oxidized and sank to the bottom. A little slow here. So here's our land, here's our ocean, here's this, here's iron, Fe, and it changed into a precipitate, sank to the bottom, and then layers and layers of rock over time trapped that iron precipitate into our rock, and then later on, us humans could remove that iron ore, and then we use it to make things like tables and bridges and buildings. Atmosphere